Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I want to believe we can hear me. Please, if you are on right now and you can hear me, can I just see a thumbs up? Good afternoon. I'm not sure. Okay, that's fine. Please, can you hear me? Ah, okay, so yeah, thank you very much. Good afternoon once again, and welcome to this interactive social media live chat on expanding access to inclusive democratic spaces for persons with disability in Nigeria. So I have a guest who is going to be live together with me this afternoon. That's Madam Grace Jerry. She's the Executive Director of Inclusive Friends Association. This is an organization for persons with disability that has been in the forefront, charting the course for an inclusive society to ensure that persons with disability are meaningfully included. And this afternoon, we want to be talking about access to democratic spaces, either as an electorate or either as for us to also exercise our civic rights. And this afternoon, we have lost a little time because of network glitches, but then thankfully we are currently on now, which I will also be requesting Madam Grace Jerry to please introduce herself and then take the conversation. And then before she do that, I would also like us to start thinking around the just concluded election, most especially for those of us that are in FCT, the just concluded area council election. So can we also start thinking around how were persons with disabilities included? And thankfully, our guest this afternoon, she actually she was fully on ground during the election, and she was able to observe the election process from the beginning till the end. So I'm going to yield the floor to her now while she take on the conversation. Thank you and good afternoon all.
Good afternoon all, and thank you, Jonapid, for the opportunity. I also want to apologize on behalf of Jonapid to say that we're a little bit behind the scheduled time, and I hope that those who joined earlier will still reconnect so that we all can be part of this all interesting conversation. I smiled, when you mentioned the word glitch, the bit of network glitch, and I hope that doesn't happen in 2027. We are all in the know of what happened in 2023, and that's why we are pushing for electoral reform to say that. I mean, we don't want to see it happen again in 2027. That's why we're calling for the real-time transmission of electoral reform. But to delve into the conversation today, and let's make it as interactive as possible. And that's why I've been able to reach out to a few persons with disabilities to please join the conversation, because this is our issue. And there's this saying that there's nothing about us without us. So let's come and talk about our issue on how we can expand access in inclusive democratic space for persons with disability. And just to give a little bit of highlights on democracy, and you all know what democracy is all about. Can you all hear me? I hope you can hear me. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
So I want to start by saying that, there's this principle that says democracy is not inclusive until it is accessible. Democracy is not inclusive until it's accessible. And the issue of accessibility cannot be emphasized, because a certain demography of people shouldn't be excluded from the democratic process. But we all know that it's been a struggle for the community of persons with disabilities for a while now. How we can ensure that democracy is inclusive of us. I will take us a little bit backwards when we at the Inclusive Friends started this whole process, and to also just trace backwards a little bit to acknowledge people who had started this process earlier, even before we came in. I knew that Jonah Pitt back then in the years have been pushing for inclusive access to inclusive democracy for persons with disability, especially as it relates with election. I came into this, I call it a struggle or a movement. I came into this struggle when people like Madam Ekaite Omo was pushing for it, Danlami Basharu was pushing for it, and so many other people. But then in 2016, when Inclusive Friends came on board, pushing issues around democracy and governance, good governance, I remember that for us to be able to speak true to the issues and speak true to the facts, we conducted an accessibility audit. And it was glaring that persons with disabilities do face a lot of barriers when it comes to inclusive participation in politics, in elections, and in all of that. And
I lost her. You lost her too.
advocacy became a tool for advocacy. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. So you see, oh my goodness, this network glitch has to, be before 2027. So if you all can hear, I was talking about the evidence-based data that we generate research that has informed. Can you all hear me? Can you see me too? Because I can't see either.
We can hear you, ma'am.
All right, perfect. So and the evidence from that research moved us from what we call the charity model to the rights-based model, because it will no longer be business as usual where the Electoral Commission or every other electoral key stakeholder would say, we don't even know what to do for you people. We came up with solutions that would better serve our community in terms of creating access to key electoral recommendations. We came up with solutions. We came up with practical examples that can be adopted by the Electoral Commission. And not just speaking to Electoral Commission, but also all the electoral key stakeholders, like, the National Assembly. You will all agree with me that in terms of legal frameworks in Nigeria that existed, we have we have the Discrimination Against Persons with Disability Prohibition Act. That's the Disability Act that speaks to the political, socioeconomic, and political life and participation of persons with disability. And interestingly, Nigeria has also ratified the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. That Article 29 also speaks to the political participation of persons with disability. And of course, some other legal frameworks that are within INEC that speaks to inclusivity. It means that we have a commission mandated to ensure that there is equal and free participation of persons with disabilities in the electoral process. But the question still remains, why do we still experience these barriers? Why do we still have these challenges? And the reason I ask this question is because just this concluded FCT area council election, I was out to observe. Inclusive Friends is a member of the Civil Society Situation Room as well as JONAPID. And of course, we were out to observe the election. And a few of the polling units that we paid or rather we went to observe, we noticed that these barriers that we thought we have addressed over a period of time, over a period of sustained advocacy from 2016 till date, we thought that these barriers would have been not just addressed, but would have been prioritized in the electoral process, especially as it concerns deployment on election day. We were out to observe. But before then, I knew that INEC held a couple of engagements. There was one of the engagements which I facilitated with some key leaders within the disability community, where we were talking about the need to come out and mass mobilize our communities to come out for the CVR process to get their voter card. And we also looked at the revalidation process where persons with disabilities who had registered in time past can update their status on the INEC portal on their disability status. We looked at all of that. And in the lead up to the election also, INEC held another stakeholder meeting with key leaders of persons with disabilities within the FCT. And following from the conversation and all that took place in that meeting, there was an assurance of INEC's deployment of the materials that would make election process easy for persons with disabilities. And so we went out in full preparation. In fact, let me use the word, we went out with our full chest to go and observe these processes and ensure that we continue to better the process, we continue to better the system on participation of persons with disability. And we went out on election day. The first 2-3 polling units that I visited were within AMAC. And one of the things that caught my attention first and foremost was the deployment of the Form EC30 EPWD poster, the poster for the deaf, which was strategically placed in almost every of the PE. In fact, even while I was driving by, or we were driving by, from afar, I could even sight that those posters were pasted. And for me, that is, it's commendable for INEC to still sustain the deployment of the Form EC30 EPWD poster that will serve the deaf community. But the thing that we didn't see is the Braille ballot guide for the blind community, and then we also didn't see the magnifying glasses for people with albinism and reduced vision. But we didn't want to just conclude our observation within that, the places we visited in AMAC. So we took a trip to other places, and then I got in touch with other key PWD leaders who were at the INEC meeting in the lead up to the election. I linked up with Kuje. I linked up with a few other places around, I think in Buari, and I think Buari, Kuje, and I'm trying to remember the third name off top of my head now. And I hope that those leaders would be part of this meeting so they could also concur to what I'm about to say. I reached out to them and said, please, they should look out for the assistive materials that INEC has proposed to deploy. Before the election day, let me take off just a step backwards. Before the election day, I also made a call. Good thing is that INEC operates an open door policy where you can reach out at any time to make these inquiries. And I reached out to make this inquiry, which they said they were deploying to about 1,200 polling units that were targeted. This targeted polling unit had registered persons with disabilities in this targeted polling unit. So INEC was planned to deploy the materials, the assistive materials, to 1,200 polling units on election day. Part of these polling units were the places that we targeted to observe, apart from just the general observation within AMAC to just look at other general conduct. But while I reached out to Kuje, reached out to Buari, and I'm trying to remember the third place, I also took a drive to, or rather we took a drive to Karamajiji, the disability colony, which is under the Guarimpa ward. And we took a drive there, and they have 2 polling units. That's the LEA primary school and then another primary school That's the one that was now reallocated or reallocated for persons with disabilities. Because while I was at the LEA primary school at Kamajiji, I noticed that there were very few persons with disabilities. So the information that was given to us was that most of them have been reallocated to the disability school, the school that was very close to the community, still within the Karamajiji disability community. So after observing at the LEA primary school at Karamajiji, of course, few of our observation was that there was accessibility barriers already because of the corridors and the setup of the general polling unit there was a lot of barriers that was in place. And I remember talking with some of the polling officials, and I was telling them that if a person like me in a wheelchair comes, I won't be able to cross over to the other side. Is it possible for you to come set up in front of this barrier thing that is right in front of us? And they said if a person with disability comes, that they will bring it up across the barrier and all of that. So I'm like, all right, well, because for me, I don't even see the possibility of that. But since they said they were going to do it, I observed a little bit, and then I had to move to where all the persons with disabilities were reallocated. And like I said, commendable. I saw the poster everywhere, the Form EC30E poster for PWDs, but there still wasn't the deployment of those magnifying glasses. So magnifying glasses and the Braille ballot guide. And I asked persons with disabilities, because I saw people who were visually impaired come to vote. In fact, I saw one who came to vote and didn't even come with someone to assist him. And when someone had to hold his hand down the ramp, and of course I saw ramp. When you talk about accessibility, I love the setup of that particular place where persons with disabilities, because they targeted the school for persons with disability within Karamajiji, and there was ramp, so it was easier for me to even move around with ease. It was easier for persons with disabilities who came to vote to move around with ease, because there were ramps, and of course the overall layout, both internal and outer layout of the polling unit was accessible. But I saw that one of the ad hoc staff led the blind man down the ramp to the voting cubicle, but of course she had to go back to the desk where she was registering people. But this blind man was just standing there all by himself, and there was nobody to assist him to thumbprint. And while I was just observing from afar, I asked the visually impaired man, didn't you come with someone to assist? He said no. And while he was, in fact, when he heard my voice asking me a question, he called me to come and assist. He said, Ma, can you come and assist me? I told him, unfortunately, I'm an observer. I would have loved to assist you, but I'm an observer. I'm supposed to observe the process. And someone had to come from the line, the long queue of persons with disability, to come assist him to be able to thumbprint. And the question I asked myself is, in the first place, if there was the Braille ballot guide, and if that visually impaired man could read and understand Braille, he would just go straight to the cubicle and just do his thing, and his disability wouldn't have been even so obvious. But then he stood there and he was calling for help, and someone had to help him. While I was done observing there, I noticed that a vehicle was moving persons with disability to another place within AMAC, I think somewhere around Wuse Zone 4, which was their polling unit. And I had to move along with them in the convoy. And among this group of persons with disabilities who moved to Wuse Zone 4, there were also visually impaired people. And I was just observing the process, and I noticed that one of the visually impaired was even being assisted by a party agent. Which for me is even a red flag. Because it automatically means that visually impaired person would not vote his choice. He would definitely vote the choice of that party agent who was assisting him within, the polling unit. And that particular polling unit have I think about 9 racks, about 9 racks within that place. So it was a big polling unit. And some of the places I went to within AMAC that had very plenty racks within one polling unit, it was just obvious that something didn't quite go as it should during the deployment of this assistive material. And I just hope that some of you who went to observe this or who went to even vote on election day, you could even drop a comment or even request to just share your experience within this. But then to look at generally, it's about time that we move from framework, from paper to action. If these policies are in place, if the Electoral Act Section 52 speaks to the mandatory ensuring that these assistive materials are made available on election day, on the policy, on the electoral law, in practicality, in action, we need to see this play out. And like I mentioned, this is this process has been ongoing since 2018, because that was the first time that the Brave Ballot Guide was piloted. So the process has been ongoing, and even the magnifying glasses from 2018 till date. It was deployed in the 2019 election. It was deployed in the 2023 election. And this of FCT area council election is more or less like a test, a litmus test in preparation for what we are going to see happen in 2027. So the question is, what happened in terms of deployment? Because the people I called in Kuje say they didn't see some of these materials. The people I call in Buari say they didn't see this material. So I think it just calls on more engagement. Again, before 2027, we need to look at it critically. We need to look critically at what didn't work and why it didn't work in the in this 2026 area council election. At what point was there a break in communication? At what point was there a break in the deployment of this material? But of course, I know that Jonah Pid, I know that Inclusive Friends, and of course other organizations that are working around the election will not relent in terms of continuing to engage with INEC, because we definitely would need to x-ray what happened within this places, within this 1,200 polling units they said they were going to deploy to. I know people like Chris Sabo, because I saw his photos and his pictures. He went out to vote. I don't know if he's on this live, but I wish that some people who were live at the polling unit could just even share their experiences, so we know that we could document more and more experiences that would form our advocacy to INEC subsequently in the lead up to 2020 election. And then to speak to the political parties too as well. I knew that political parties, in terms of their manifestos on what they will do when they are being voted for, most of them clustered persons with disability under the vulnerable community. So you would see them talk about what they would do for the women, and somewhere what they would do for youth, and then they would say the vulnerable community. Now, the danger of generalizing persons with disability under the umbrella name of the vulnerable group is that there's a huge possibility of not having targeted intervention for persons with disabilities. A huge percentage of persons with disabilities. So the danger of generalizing persons with disabilities under the general vulnerable group is something that I think that political parties should shy away from. Political parties should stop doing it. Let me use that word. Should stop doing it. And the word generalizing the word vulnerable group should be unpacked, because it's not a one-size-fits-all intervention. The intervention that will serve community of persons with disabilities is different from what will serve the maybe the children, the vulnerable children, or would serve the aged in our society. So it is important that you focus on what intervention would better serve the community of persons with disabilities. So the umbrella word is unpacked. And that is my call to political parties. Another thing, let me take us back a little bit, just a step backwards, is something that we also observed in the polling unit, something that INEC did that is remarkable. And it's something that, as part of our own advocacy, INEC has listened and they are practicing it, where you have persons with disabilities serve as ad hoc staff. We saw a girl, a deaf girl, who served as an ad hoc staff on election day, and that gladdened our hearts so much to see that INEC is practicing inclusivity as they have promised to. But then there are still a lot of gaps that need to be closed. When INEC speaks to, this is what we're going to do, and publicly say it that this is what we're going to do, and then you go out on election day and you see that these things are not in place. The interesting thing is that since it's an observation, we keep documenting these issues and we go with evidence to them. So it's not just the word of mouth to say that we went to this polling unit and these materials were not there. We make sure that we document these experiences, we document what we see on election day, and that is what we propose to INEC as what we want to see moving forward. I see people dropping their comments on that it's pertinent. Let me read what somebody wrote. That documentation and institution engagement is needed. Of course, I remember when we started this process with INEC, one of the things we look at was their training manual. And what were the gaps that existed within this training manual? It didn't speak to training of trainers. It didn't speak to training of ad hoc staff on how they can manage the persons with disabilities who are registered voters. And because these gaps existed in the manual, I remember that in, I think it was in 2017 or 2018, 2017 or so, the Inclusive Friends reviewed the training manual, the INEX training manual, to ensure that most of these issues that we're talking about is institutionalized. It becomes part of the framework, it becomes part of the training manual, such that whenever a new let me say national commissioners come on board, directors come on board, or even a new chairman comes on board, when the management changes within INEC, because these recommendations are already institutionalized, they will continue with what we have requested for within the training manual. So these issues have been institutionalized. So it's not an issue of, well, it is not there. It is already within the INEC training manual to ensure that trainings are all inclusive. Inclusive Friends has been part of those trainings over time in preparation to any of these elections that are coming up. And I know that Situation Room 2 has done a couple of things with Jonah Pitt with INEC. Another thing I'm also going to speak to is the existence of data. The existence of disability disaggregated data is also a part that we need to pay very, very close attention to. And I say so because in the lead up to the election, when we paid a visit to the resident electoral commissioner for FCT, we got the data of the CVR that were conducted before the election, and how many people, like newly registered voters, and based on their data, they had about 3,000 persons with disabilities who had registered, and of course broken down within the various disability clusters. And one of the questions I remember we posed was that, will these 3,000 newly registered voters, the data, will it be matched with the previous data from 2023, previous data from 2019, I mean? Will all of this data be put together such that you can speak to the number in terms of the newly registered and the previously registered persons with disability. And I think that this is an area that we also need to advocate to INEC whenever they are putting together, or whenever they are updating, or whenever they are putting together the data of newly registered voters. There is need to always update the voter register, so that the numbers will tie with both previous persons with disabilities who are registered, and will also tie with the newly registered voters, so that on election day we are not hearing that it's 3,000 people with disabilities they are deploying to know what happened to those who had registered before. So it is important to harmonize this data together. It is important to update the existing voter register to capture disability data. And I think that another thing, or the last thing that I am going to speak to, is the capturing of data of persons with disability on election day itself. The Form EC40H is meant to capture data of persons with disabilities who are immediately they are done casting their ballot on election day. The Form EC40H would, their details will be captured on the Form EC40H by the ad hoc staff. Now, this we didn't see on the FCT area council election. And I think that in past elections, we have made these recommendations over and over to INEC to say that the Form EC40H exists, but those data are not being captured on election day. Now, what this data would do for INEC is to also ascertain the numbers of persons with disabilities who have come out to vote on election day. So you are able to pull out that percentage, and we continue to work based on, okay, what are the gaps? Do we continue with sensitization? Which cluster of disabilities turn out more? And which cluster of persons with disabilities turn out less? And what is the reason why they turn out less? Is it as a result of inaccessibility of the polling unit or polling or election materials? Is it as a result of maybe voter apathy, lack of interest in the process? Is it as a result of poor sensitization? Probably sensitization didn't get to them. These are the ways that we can checkmate all of these barriers if the data on Form EC40H is captured properly on election day. Now, this is another form that we know that is not properly utilized on election day and needs to be looked into. But generally, to say that we will continue to talk about this issue, and we will continue to make recommendations. We will continue to engage with INEC. We'll continue to engage even with the National Assembly, because now the budget for 2027 election, it is important to even see or to know what, in terms of INEC's preparation for 2027 election, what is the percentage? What is the figure? What is INEC going into the 2027 election with as regards persons with disability? And let's begin to look for a way that we can engage with even the National Assembly. Need to continue to speak to inclusion, speak to access as it relates to this demography of persons with disability. So I'm going to pause here a while just to ask if there are questions. If Jonapid has any information they would want to pass across, and we move on from there. Thank you very much. You can also drop your questions in the chat. I see people engaging very well, and that's so impressive. That's impressive. So I see someone mentioned that people within the rural communities are even unaware of their voting rights. So that calls on more sensitization. OPDs, Organizations of Persons with Disabilities, let's continue to carry out more sensitization, but most especially the Electoral Commission. We need to always talk about this issue. And you see why I mentioned that possibly people don't come out, persons with disabilities don't really come out in amount or in number, because probably this sensitization does not even reach them, or they don't know of these beautiful innovations that will make voting very accessible and easy for them. If we don't create more sensitization around these issues, they will not hear, they will not know. The National Orientation Agency, too, you have a lot of work to do around sensitizing the public, especially persons with disabilities in the communities, in the rural areas, on why they need to come out and vote on election day. Someone said participation is not just about having the right to vote, it is about having the ability to vote independently. Exactly. And that's what, we keep advocating. These innovations, the Braille ballot guide, the magnifying glasses, the Form EC30 PWD poster, these are all processes to ensure that the voting process is done independently. Come in and I vote in dignity. I vote in an environment that all barriers are being addressed, such that I come in to vote unaided. I come in to vote, and nothing is posing as a barrier in my way, and all of that. And that is why we will not relent when it comes to engaging and advocating for ensuring that our election continues to be accessible. Keep your comments coming. Jonapid, anything you want to say? Because I can't see you. I've just been talking and I'm not even seeing myself either. I think it's the network.
Yeah, thank you so much. We have been here and we've been enjoying the conversation, and it is amazing that you're actually talking from the point of experiences. You are sharing from the point of knowledge, which actually would sufficiently help the community to be able to have the conversation. And I really believe that this is just the beginning of the conversation, because for us 2027 is still there. We can try to gather together all the evidence that we have based on this FCT area council election, and use that to push forward for a more stronger and inclusive electoral process. So we have to go beyond just advocating for ensuring that persons with disabilities are included in electoral process, but also sensitizing our communities and say that persons with disabilities ourselves, we take serious this process and utilize every opportunity that we have to make sure that our voice counts and our vote matters. Once again, I would like to say thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Grace Jerry, for this opportunity to share on this platform this afternoon. And we are also going to be live the same time, the same day next week. We are going to be here same time, 1 p.m. We want to apologize for the issues we have with the network earlier, and we are hoping that by next Thursday we would have a better opportunity to engage, and then we'll have a better atmosphere to interact more than we have today. And lastly, I'll also say thank you to everyone that has joined and engaged on this platform. Let's not just let it end here. Let's take the conversation further to our community. Let's also try to sensitize ourselves. We are all leaders in our space. Let's take on the conversation and ensure that coming 2027, we are all out there to cast our votes. We are all out there to ensure that we perform our civic rights. And we are also hoping that in the nearest future, hopefully 2027, we'll start seeing persons with disability coming out for governorship position, for presidential position, when we have the space as inclusive as possible. Lastly, I would also like to say to everyone that is on the platform to please kindly click on the Google Doc link that has been shared in the comment section to fill in the attendance for being on this platform this afternoon. So I don't know, Madam Grace, if you have any other thing to add before we close the session.
Okay, I want to say, buttress on what you said. This conversation is going to be happening next Thursday. Also, the upper week Thursday. So let's speak to other persons with disabilities and every other key stakeholder, not just the persons with disability. Let's just come and engage and continue to push for this issue, because what we're trying to do is to see how we, towards 2027, a lot of things, a lot of recommendations are being met, a lot of milestones will be achieved as we prepare for the 2027 elections. So come out en masse and continue to engage. And let's see how we can ensure that democracy serves all, democracy is inclusive of all, and we continue to promote the principle of leave no one behind, nothing about us without us. Thank you very much.
Okay, so on that note, I would like to say a final thank you to everyone. We hope to see you same time, same station, next Thursday. We would be live at exactly 1 o'clock next Thursday. Please, let's try and make it a date. And I'm assuring you that by next Thursday, the conversation will be much more interesting, as Madam Grace has already informed. Let's not limit this space to just persons with disability. Let's also include other stakeholders that are within the community that can champion inclusive opportunities for persons with disability to participate as a voter and also as an electorate. Thank you so much, everyone. And on this note, we say our goodbye. See you next Thursday.